I believe we do have some early numbers now from Tarrant County on the governor's race. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a few moments ago. Whether Beto O'Rourke can again win Tarrant County here like he did in 2018 against Ted Cruz when he ran for Senate. Beto O'Rourke is behind now by 15,000 votes to incumbent Greg Abbott. This, of course, is an election, Bernadine, that Republicans were, leading in to start with. That number doesn't surprise me that much, honestly.
Well, it doesn't surprise me, but as Bud was saying, we were watching a 6-point spread. But that's not a 6-point spread.
I think that was a 3 or 4 point spread. Is what that one?
Yeah, so that's just
county races are a 6.
Well, but what I'm saying is that you have some who. I know that that's statewide. I mean, no, that was Tarrant County, right?
That was Tarrant County.
Okay, so you had voters who voted for Republicans and did not vote for, or voted for Democrats and didn't vote for Republicans. So that could be a trend as well, because you had almost 3-point Republicans who did not vote for Abbott.
And if you have 2/3 of that early vote in the total count, 15,000 votes doesn't seem like it's that much to make up, Bud, if Democrats are still crossing their fingers on this.
We are seeing Arlington Democrats so far holding on to their commissioner seat in Arlington and holding on to their JP seat in Arlington, which really was going to be it's going to be a hard job in this year.
And if I can, I just see the numbers from Dallas County, and Beto is beating Abbott 64 to 34, which is a much larger margin than we saw Crusoe beating Faith Johnson. Yeah. So it looks like Beto is outperforming the local Democrats, both in Tarrant and Dallas County, and that could signal that there might be closer statewide than I thought it was going to be, and the polls indicated between Abbott and Beto.
Beto, I called you. Domingo, explain how that works, though. Voters are going down their ballot, and they're going back and forth and deciding who to vote for.
Somewhere
Explain
maybe
to our
just
viewers how that works.
We no longer have straight party balloting, so therefore they have to vote for every single candidate. Some of them may be there and voting for Beto and then not voting again, or they vote for Beto, then they switch to the Republican and then go back and forth. So you might be seeing more of an impact from the independent voters.
I don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, Jason, but Republicans again have the confidence going into tonight. Should Republicans really be should Democrats really be getting their hopes up right now, just a few minutes after the top of the hour?
Well, it's very early, and traditionally, Election Day benefits Republicans, right? Republicans are told not to vote early. They're told to go to the polls. They're told to show up and vote the day of, so there's no shenanigans going on. So I think you're going, and what Bud mentioned was happening in Tarrant County. Evidence is that most Republicans are showing up in those red counties. I think you're going to see Republicans do very well on Election Day. I know that in my old elections we did well on Election Day.
As far as turnout for Republican voters, for people who don't realize that, Republicans actually show up usually to vote, traditionally, historically, on Election Day itself. Democrats will show up for early voting.
Early or mail-in votes. You normally see that the split pretty good. It's pretty evident in most of the trends, at least in Dallas County. But I do think the ticket splitting is interesting. That tells me that Beto is outperforming, not only in the urban centers, but that probably means in the rural centers where he actually campaigned. I think it's going to be close. Our poll at the Texas Hispanic Policy Foundation suggested it'd be about a 5 to 6 to 7 point race. I think we're looking at something like that.
In the governor's race.
In the governor's race. Certainly not going to be in the 13, 14, 15 range that we saw in the last few days. I just don't think it's going to be that wide of a margin. I think our numbers originally are going to be much more close to what we're going to see on Election Day.
Let's talk about that for a moment. Just for context for our listeners, in 2014, when Abbott first ran, he defeated Wendy Davis, the former state senator from Fort Worth, by 24 points, I believe. 2018, 4 years ago, he ran against a no-name candidate, the former sheriff of Dallas County, who wasn't well known across the state. Abbott beat her by, I think, 13 points. Mm-hmm. And if this ends up a single-digit race, the trend is going the wrong way for Republicans there, and at some point, this will really become competitive, right?
Well, that's been the talk for the last decade. We haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen a Democrat able to overcome those margins just yet, but there's unquestionably a trend, right? And even if you look at the presidential races in the other years, we see Trump's numbers are down to 2 and 3 points above Biden in Texas. It wasn't an overwhelming majority that he won. And so when you start to see those numbers shrink, that speaks to the demographics, that speaks to the people that are moving into Texas, and that speaks to the growing strength of the Hispanic vote here in Texas, which I know that the conventional wisdom is that that vote is moving to the right, but I can tell you from our data, we're not seeing a wholesale movement that direction. It's not going to be material if it is anytime soon. If that shift occurs, it's going to be over many, many cycles, not in 2 or 3 cycles.
And Bernadine, I cut you off a moment ago.
Quickly, and I will say this too, that the early vote apparently shows a more sophisticated voting population.
What does that mean?
Because they're split the ticket. And typically, Texas has done the straight party, which the Republicans changed. But that's a sophisticated voter, because Texas voters are used to going to the polls and hitting Democrat, hitting Republican. Mm-hmm. But the early voting does show, I mean, that's factual, that is apparently the voters are splitting their ticket. And that is a sophisticated voter.
The people are going down choosing Republican here, Democrat there, Republican, Democrat, Republican,
Yes.
Democrat.
Yes.
They're reading more on the internet too. One of the factors coming in that was interesting the last couple of days. The last couple of days has been an upturn in readership on the Attorney General's race. People are seeing Rochelle Garza's name. If you look at Google Trends, people suddenly are most read. Election coverage at the Star-Telegram has been about the Attorney General's race. They want to know more about it. Rochelle Garza, should they vote for her instead of Ken Paxton? They're reading up before they go.
So we talked a lot about the local races. We've talked about the governor's race as well, too. But let's talk about 2 other races here briefly. The Attorney General's race, Ken Paxton versus Rochelle Garza, and the Lieutenant Governor's race, Mike Collier versus Dan Patrick. Specifically, I'm curious about the Attorney General's race, Domingo. What happens here for Rochelle Garza in the Valley? We've seen voters in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, the southern tip of Texas, vote for a Hispanic surname over an Anglo name in the past. I think of 2018, the primary of Beto O'Rourke, where he got smoked down there. Does that help her?
I think it greatly helps her. I think they're going to be Hispanic Republicans like Jason over here who are going to be voting for Rochelle Garza because she's running against a very unpopular Attorney General, indicted, facing criminal charges with all kinds of corruption allegations in his office. And I'm looking here that Rochelle actually matches Beto in Dallas County in the early vote, but there's in the comptroller's office it's only 60%, while she's getting 65%. So you're having that switch of people who voted for her, but then went back and voted for Republican for comptroller. So I don't know if that's going to be enough statewide.
Before we talk about some new numbers we're about to show you in just a moment, I want to ask you the same thing about Garza. How much is Garza helped by her surname in her hometown, essentially, of Brownsville, the Rio Grande Valley?
I think she's helped less by her surname than the baggage that Ken Paxton carries to this race. I mean, Ken Paxton is a damaged candidate, regardless of how you look at it. He is going to underperform both Abbott and Patrick in these statewide races. And so she brings an advantage for that reason alone. But in addition to that, having a Hispanic surname, that may help you in certain regions that are less populated in Texas, like the Valley, but it does not help you in rural counties around the rest of the state. And that's why I think he is able to overcome that baggage and eke out a victory in this race.